Everyone tells people moving to Colorado, you know what, you should rent first. But before you sign that lease, there is something that you need to know. I've seen people spend thousands of dollars moving twice, paying rent, paying deposits, paying storage fees, and delaying their home purchase, only to end up buying exactly where they originally wanted to live. But I've also seen people buy too quickly, and then they realize 6 months later they would have chosen a completely different community if they'd given themselves more time. So which mistake are you more likely to make? That's exactly what we're talking about today. And before we're done, I'm going to share the one question that almost nobody asks before moving to Colorado. But it often determines whether you're renting or buying was the better decision. Because whether you're relocating for a new job, pursuing a more active lifestyle, downsizing into your next chapter, moving closer to loved ones, or simply looking for a fresh start, the answer isn't nearly as simple as most people make it sound. So let's dive right in. And the biggest mistake that I see people make isn't renting. And, well, it isn't buying. It's following someone else's strategy. Everyone has an opinion. Your neighbor, your coworker, oh, and your cousin who moved here 3 years ago. Don't forget the internet, because everyone says you should definitely rent first, or you should absolutely buy right away. But here's the problem. They're making recommendations based on their situation, not yours. And that's why the first factor matters so much. Have you actually spent time here? And I know that sounds obvious, but it surprises me how often people overlook it. Have you visited multiple times? Have you driven your potential commute? Have you spent time in the communities that you're actually considering? Because Golden, well, it feels much different than Littleton, and, well, Littleton feels different than Arvada, and Arvada feels different than Lakewood. And what looks perfect online, well, it doesn't always feel perfect once you're living there. And I don't mean spending a Saturday afternoon driving around. I mean experiencing what your life might actually look like. Have you gone to the grocery store? Have you driven the commute during rush hour? Have you spent time in the area on both a weekday and a weekend? Because vacation mode and everyday life are two very different things. What feels exciting during a 3-day visit can feel very different once it becomes your everyday routine. And this surprises a lot of relocators. They spend months researching online. They arrive in Colorado and quickly realize the things that matter most to them weren't the things they were focusing on during their research. Let me ask you something. Are you moving to a place you've actually experienced? Or are you moving to a place you've mostly researched? That's an important distinction, because if you visited several times, explored neighborhoods, understand your commute, and have a strong sense of where you want to live, well, then buying immediately may be a reasonable option. But if you're moving largely based on research and haven't spent much time here, renting first may help reduce uncertainty. Now let's move to the second factor. And this is where I've seen some of the most expensive mistakes happen. How stable is your job situation? Are you relocating because of a company transfer? Have you been working remotely for years? Are you accepting a promotion? Or are you starting a completely new role with a company you've never worked for before? Because those situations are very different. If you've had a stable remote position for several years, or you're transferring within the same organization, you may have a much clearer picture of your future. But if you're making a major career change at the same time that you're making a major geographic move, well, that's a lot of change happening all at once. And sometimes flexibility becomes incredibly valuable. Now, I've seen people become so focused on finding the perfect house that they forget to evaluate whether everything else in their life is settled first. And before you decide whether renting or buying is right for you, there's one more factor that almost nobody talks about. Do you actually know how you want to live? Notice I didn't say, do you know where you want to live? I said, do you know how you want to live? Because that's where many relocating buyers get stuck. They're comparing cities, but what they really need is to be comparing the lifestyle. And this is where many people accidentally make the wrong decision. They're focused on finding the right zip code when they should be focused on how they want to spend their time. Ask yourself, do you want to leave your house and be on the trail within minutes? Or do you want easy access to Denver without actually living in Denver? Or are you looking for a lower maintenance lifestyle so that you can travel more? How about, are you hoping to simplify life and spend less time taking care of a home? Are you looking for a community that supports more active lifestyle? Or are you simply looking for a fresh start? Because those questions often matter more than the city itself. Because once you understand how you want to live, the location becomes much easier to identify. And here's the part that surprises most relocators. The community people think they want isn't always the community that they end up loving. And I've seen buyers completely change their minds after spending time in the area that they were considering. Sometimes the place they weren't even looking at becomes their favorite. I've seen this happen more than once. Someone arrives convinced that they know exactly where they want to live. They've researched for months. They've watched the videos. They've studied the maps. Then they spend a few days exploring communities in person. And suddenly everything changes. Not because their original choice was wrong. It simply wasn't the best fit for the lifestyle that they were trying to create. That's why I always encourage people to focus on lifestyle first and location second. Now the city matters, but how you want your daily life to feel matters even more. Now let's talk about the benefits of renting. The biggest benefit certainly is flexibility. You can experience your commute. You can learn the area. You can spend weekends exploring different communities. You can discover which areas naturally fit your lifestyle. And you can reduce some of the pressure that comes from trying to make a major decision from another state. Now for some people, that's incredibly valuable. But here's the part that people don't always talk about. Renting first usually means moving twice. It may mean storage costs, deposits, application fees, moving trucks, utility transfers, and additional time. There's also another cost that rarely gets discussed: decision fatigue. Now, moving is stressful. Starting a new job, well, that can be stressful. Learning a new area can certainly be stressful. And for some people, having 6 months to evaluate their options just feels empowering. For others, well, it could feel exhausting. Some people would rather make one decision, get settled, and then move forward. Now, neither approach is wrong, but understanding yourself is part of the situation too. I've also seen people spend 6 months renting, only to realize that they wanted to buy in the exact area that they originally identified. Which brings us back to something that I mentioned earlier. Renting first isn't always the smart play. Sometimes it's simply the safe play. And sometimes safe comes with a price. Now let's look at the benefits of buying immediately. The biggest benefit is simplicity. You move once. You get settled. You begin building your life in the community that you've chosen. You don't have temporary housing. You don't have a second move hanging over your head. You can start creating routines immediately. But there are risks too. You may discover your commute, well, it feels different than expected. You may realize that another community would have fit your lifestyle a little bit better. And you may learn things about your daily routine that you simply couldn't have known before arriving. Which is why there isn't one perfect answer. There are simply different trade-offs. Now, remember earlier when I mentioned the one question that almost nobody asks before moving to Colorado? Well, here it is. How long do you plan to stay? Because that question changes everything. Now, if you're planning to stay in Colorado for many years, your decision-making process may look very different than someone who's determining whether Colorado is the right long-term fit. And there's another reason that this question matters. Many people relocating to Colorado aren't simply changing locations. They're entering a new chapter of life. Some are looking for a more active lifestyle, while some are looking to simplify. Some are looking to downsize or even right size. Some are seeking lower maintenance living. And while some are looking for a home that better fits the life that they're living today rather than the life that they were living 10 years ago. Others are realizing they don't need much space as they once did. And many are asking a completely different question. Not what's the biggest house I can buy, but rather, what kind of life do I want to create? That's a very different decision-making process. Others are moving closer to loved ones. And for those buyers, the rent versus buy decision often looks very different because they're not simply evaluating a home, they're evaluating what they want everyday life to look like over the next 5, maybe 10, or even 15 years. And that's why understanding your long-term goals is so important. One thing I've learned after helping people relocate to Colorado is that there usually isn't one right answer. There are just simply different trade-offs. Renting first may be the right move for one person, while buying immediately may be the right move for another. The goal isn't choosing the option everyone else is recommending. The goal is understanding those trade-offs before you make a decision that could impact your finances, your daily routine, your lifestyle, and ultimately how much you can enjoy this next chapter of life in Colorado. And if there's one thing I hope you take away from this video is this. And don't rent first because someone told you to. And don't buy first because, well, someone told you to. Understand your situation before you move, because the smartest relocation strategy is the one that fits the life that you're trying to create. And if you're still trying to decide whether renting or buying is the right move, the next thing you need to understand is what your budget actually gets you in Colorado. That's why I recommend watching my video, Moving to Colorado, What Your Budget Really Gets You in Golden, Littleton, Lakewood, and Arvada. Because understanding what's available at different price points can completely change how you think about renting versus buying. And if you're still trying to figure out which community fits your lifestyle, make sure you check out my Where You Should Live in West Denver playlist. It compares Golden, Littleton, Lakewood, Arvada, and several other communities so that you can start narrowing down which area may be the best fit for your goals, your lifestyle, and this next chapter of life. And if you'd like help thinking through your specific situation, give me a call, send me a text, or reach out through my website. I'll help you think through the relocation side of the decision. And if needed, I can connect you with trusted local lending professionals who can help you compare monthly payment scenarios, financing options, and develop a strategy based on your goals and your timeline. Sometimes a simple conversation can save you from making a very expensive mistake. But until then, remember, life is short, live somewhere awesome, and be well. We'll see you next time.